Picture this. It's March 2023. You're tuning into this live, highly publicized interview.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, exactly. So on one side of the screen, you have Prince Harry, right? Fresh off the release of his ghost-written memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side sits Dr. Gabor Mate, who is, a retired family physician and honestly one of the most prominent trauma experts in the world.
Oh, absolutely. He's massive in that space.
Right. So they're talking, the cameras are rolling, and right there on a live broadcast, Dr. Mate just boldly diagnoses Prince Harry with ADD, depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Just right out in the open.
Yeah, just like that. Live streamed to the entire globe.
It's an incredibly jarring visual, honestly. I mean, we're looking at a deeply clinical, inherently personal medical assessment, but it's just completely stripped of all its traditional boundaries.
Exactly.
It's just served up as a media spectacle.
That was my exact immediate reaction when I was reading this in our sources. My brain just screamed like, wait, is this normal now?
Yeah, you really have to wonder.
Because a medical diagnosis usually requires, hours of structured assessment, a clinical history, and above all, a closed door.
Right. It demands privacy.
But instead, we're watching someone's actual psychological profile being actively mined as content. I mean, it really makes you wonder why we're suddenly diagnosing everybody and why a heavy clinical word like trauma has been downgraded to something we just casually toss around at brunch.
Well, we're basically watching a massive cultural paradigm shift play out in real time here.
Yeah.
We've transitioned from a society that historically completely buried and stigmatized psychological pain to one that essentially just broadcasts it on a loop.
Which is quite the pendulum swing.
It really is. And the underlying tension we have to navigate here is whether this aggressive public excavation of our inner lives is actually leading to healing.
Right.
Or if it's mutating into this bizarre form of entertainment and identity building.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
Today, we're taking a stack of really fascinating sources, ranging from cultural critiques in The Guardian to clinical psychology data, all the way through a recent doctoral dissertation on mobile dating apps.
It's a great lineup of research.
It really is. We're going to unpack how the word trauma got completely commodified. We'll explore what real clinical psychological distress actually does to the brain and how it shatters our interpersonal boundaries.
Which is a huge factor.
Huge. And ultimately, we're going to look at how that distress drastically alters the way we present our identities when we're, just swiping on dating apps.
Because we live in an era of just unprecedented hyper-awareness regarding mental health right now.
Oh, for sure.
But we have to ask ourselves a fairly uncomfortable question. Is this hyper-awareness actually making you, the listener, any healthier?
Right. Is it actually working?
Exactly. Or is it just providing you with a brand new lifestyle product to consume?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sheer scale of this trauma epidemic in the data is just staggering.
The numbers are wild.
They really are. Looking at the Guardian piece, the numbers just jump right off the page. I mean, if you open up TikTok today and search for the hashtag trauma talk, you're going to hit a wall of over 650,000 posts.
Over 500,000. That's just wild.
Yeah. And if you walk into a Barnes & Noble, you'll find more than 3,300 titles sitting in the anxiety, stress, and trauma section.
And it's not just the sheer volume, it's the actual content of these posts and books that is so striking.
Right. The content is wild. We're seeing incredibly ordinary human quirks, like being a perfectionist or procrastinating on a tough work assignment or even just being a little selfish in a relationship. And suddenly all of that is being pathologized as trauma responses.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand the mechanics of how everyday stress became pathologized like this, we really have to trace the evolution of the term itself.
Okay, lay it on me. Where does it start?
So the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, was officially introduced into the American Psychiatric Association's diagnostic manual back in 1980.
1980. Okay.
Yeah, and at its inception, it was specifically designed to categorize the severe nightmares, the flashbacks, and the neurological disruptions of combat veterans.
Right, guys coming back from war.
Exactly. And the definition was incredibly strict. It required direct exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence.
So it was really reserved for catastrophic, life-shattering events.
Exactly. It was a very narrow, specific clinical category.
But the sources point to a massive pivot around 2014, right?
Yeah.
Heavily driven by Bessel van der Kolk's bestseller, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes. Van der Kolk introduced a really vital clinical insight.
Which was what, exactly?
He argued that traumatic memories often bypass conscious recall entirely, and they lodge themselves deeply within the body's sensory and nervous systems.
Oh, wow. So the physical danger might have passed, like, years ago, but the body continues to react as if the threat is happening right now in the present moment.
Exactly. And clinically, that was a huge breakthrough for treating severe abuse survivors.
I bet. But something got lost in translation, right?
Yeah, as that concept filtered down through the pop culture telephone game, those strict clinical boundaries we talked about, they completely evaporated.
So suddenly the inevitable everyday abrasions of just ordinary life,
Yeah.
a bad breakup, a tough semester, a demanding boss,
Right.
all of that started getting swept under the exact same umbrella as surviving an actual war zone.
It did, and it creates a huge problem.
It feels like, it's basically semantic inflation. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
That's a great analogy.
If a government prints too much money, the currency loses its purchasing power. So if we use the exact same word to describe occupational burnout and surviving a life-threatening disaster, the word trauma just completely loses its utility.
It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Exactly.
Dr. Arash Javan Bakht, a psychiatrist and trauma expert cited in our sources, he actually summarized it perfectly when he said, when everything is trauma, nothing is.
When everything is trauma, nothing is. Wow, that is spot on.
It really is. And he points to a fascinating, large-scale historical case study to back this up.
Oh, the 9/11 example.
Yes. In the immediate aftermath of the September 11th attacks in New York City, mental health professionals and government agencies completely braced for a massive, widespread wave of psychological fallout.
Which, makes total sense. You'd expect that.
Right. Millions of dollars in crisis counseling grants flooded into the city's health systems to prepare for this anticipated epidemic of PTSD.
But the data from the sources shows that wave never actually materialized, right?
It didn't. Clinical psychologist George Banana, who directs the Loss, Trauma, and Emotion Lab at Columbia University, he tracked the data.
And what did he find?
He found that hardly anyone actually utilized or needed those specific crisis services long term.
That is wild to me. Why not?
The reason comes down to basic human biology. Extreme resilience is our biological norm.
Wow.
The lifetime prevalence of true PTSD among American adults hovers just below 7%.
It's less than 7%. So experiencing a highly stressful or even a traumatic event doesn't mean your brain is permanently broken.
No, not at all. We are evolutionarily wired to process grief and fear and then adapt.
But wait, if biological resilience is the norm, how do we explain the massive, well-documented spike in anxiety and depression diagnoses over the last decade?
It's a great question.
Why are 650,000 people on TikTok claiming to be traumatized? Are they all just faking it for views?
Well, no, they aren't necessarily faking their distress, but they are mislabeling it.
Okay, why?
Because the word trauma has become a powerful form of cultural currency.
Oh, that makes sense.
In a modern society where people feel increasingly stripped of control, whether that's due to economic instability or the dread of climate change or just the intense digital isolation of social media.
Yeah, everyone feels so isolated right now.
Exactly. Claiming a trauma identity serves a very specific psychological function in that environment.
What does it do for them?
It provides a concrete meaning for the vague ambient feeling of just being stuck in life. As Banano cynically notes, it acts as an alibi that completely removes personal agency.
Oh, wow. So it allows a person to say, I'm acting out or I'm failing, not because of a character flaw or a bad choice, but because of this subterranean pain that I simply can't control.
Exactly. It grants an identity that is, as one psychologist put it, virtuous but impotent.
Virtuous but impotent. That is powerful. And it makes a lot of sense. It functions as this impenetrable shield against criticism.
It does. But the tragic irony the sources highlight is that this trend actively harms real victims.
Right. We end up platforming these privileged influencers who have the abundant time and resources to curate this sort of glorious trauma aesthetic online.
While the actual victims are just totally ignored.
Yeah, refugees, torture survivors, people living in extreme, inescapable poverty, they're pushed completely to the margins.
And beyond eclipsing real victims, the research suggests a darker psychological consequence for the individuals who are mislabeling themselves.
What happens to them?
Falsely slapping a clinical trauma label onto everyday distress can actually induce a genuine increase in anxiety symptoms.
Wait, really? It actually makes them worse?
Yes. The label becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Psychological pain, frustration, sadness, these are normal functioning parts of how the human brain processes the world.
Right.
When we pathologize all pain as a disorder, we lose our ability to cope with basic adversity.
So if over-apologizing to a coworker or hating your commute isn't a trauma response, what is the actual clinical threshold here?
We have to look past standard PTSD for that.
Okay, so how does real clinical trauma physically and emotionally alter our relationships?
To grasp the clinical reality, we have to examine complex PTSD or CPTSD.
Which is different from standard PTSD.
Yes. Standard PTSD is generally tied to a single acute shattering event, like a car crash or a natural disaster.
Yeah.
CPTSD, which is now officially recognized in the World Health Organization's International Classification of Diseases, the ICD-11, is fundamentally different. It results from prolonged, recurring, and inescapable trauma. We're talking about severe, chronic childhood abuse, long-term domestic violence, or human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
The key mechanism there is the inability to escape the threat over an extended period of time.
And the sources from Psychology Today and Medical News Today, they break down the physical symptoms, and they sound vastly more severe than just feeling stressed out.
Oh, absolutely.
They list things like intrusion, avoidance, and hyperarousal. I really want to talk about intrusion.
Yeah, that's a critical one.
When we talk about intrusion, what's actually happening in the brain? Like, why does a flashback feel so viscerally real to these people?
Intrusion is essentially an amygdala hijack.
Okay, break that down for me.
The amygdala is the brain's threat detection center, right? And during severe trauma, it can become so overwhelmed that it fails to properly timestamp a memory as belonging to the past.
So it doesn't file it away as a memory?
Exactly. So when a survivor encounters a trigger, maybe a specific smell or a tone of voice, the amygdala sounds the alarm as if the abuse is happening right now in the present tense.
Wow. So the body is just instantly flooded with cortisol and adrenaline.
Yes. And that leads to hyperarousal, where the nervous system is just permanently stuck in high gear.
Right.
The person is perpetually scanning the environment for threats. They are physically unable to biologically relax.
And the sources also note that CPTSD gets particularly devastating because it closely mimics borderline personality disorder, or BPD.
It does, very closely.
Why would a clinician confuse the two?
Well, both conditions feature intense emotional dysregulation, chronic feelings of emptiness, and severe fears of abandonment.
But the root causes are different.
Very different. BPD often involves a pervasive, lifelong pattern of instability in self-image and relationships.
Okay.
But in CPTSD, those shattered self-beliefs and intense reactions are a direct learned adaptation.
Adapted to what?
To surviving an environment where the people who were supposed to provide care were instead the source of inescapable terror.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. And the most profound casualty of this environment is the individual's interpersonal boundaries.
Right. The sources from Northside Psychology illustrate this breakdown so beautifully.
They really do.
They describe how survivors, whose boundaries were repeatedly violated, they often swing to one of two extreme ends of a pendulum.
Exactly.
On one side, they construct these impenetrable, rigid brick walls. They withdraw completely and push everyone away because their brain has learned that absolutely no one can be trusted.
That's the rigid side.
Yeah. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, they have zero boundaries at all.
Right.
They over-accommodate, they completely lose the ability to say no, and they feel entirely, overwhelmingly responsible for managing everyone else's emotional state just to avoid conflict.
And you can see how both of those extremes just completely destroy the foundation of a healthy relationship. If your baseline assumption is that people are inherently dangerous and untrustworthy, even a completely innocent, offhand remark from a partner can be perceived as a profound threat.
Right, which would trigger a massive, disproportionate emotional reaction.
Exactly. Trauma, at its core, is a profound violation of safety. When those boundaries are shattered, it skews the survivor's entire perception of personal rights and control.
But the clinical sources do offer some actionable, structured insights for reclaiming those boundaries, right? Which is nice because it shows it isn't a life sentence.
Yes, there is absolutely a path forward.
They focus on using clear I statements to assert needs without triggering an aggressive escalation. And they really emphasize maintaining strict consistency even when it feels completely exhausting.
Which it often does.
Yeah. They also advocate for practicing intense self-compassion and, most importantly, preparing for pushback.
Pushback is guaranteed.
Right, because when you finally start setting hard boundaries with people who have grown accustomed to you not having any, they are absolutely going to resist it.
They will. And the why behind these clinical exercises is crucial.
Why is that?
Because setting a boundary after experiencing severe trauma isn't just about carving out a more comfortable environment. It is a biological and psychological necessity.
It's survival.
Exactly. It's the physical act of reclaiming your voice, your bodily autonomy, and your self-respect in a world that your nervous system previously logged as entirely unsafe.
Wow.
It's the mechanism for moving from being a passive recipient of external harm to an active architect of your own safety.
That is so profound. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Okay.
We've been talking about setting boundaries in the physical, real world, which is messy and unpredictable.
Very much so.
But what happens when we shift this entire dynamic into the highly controlled, aggressively curated world of digital boundaries?
Yes.
Specifically, mobile dating apps.
Mobile dating apps, or MDAs, they operate as the ultimate digital boundary setting laboratories.
They really are. They're essentially highly curated boundary setting simulators.
That's exactly what they are.
Like on platforms like Tinder, Bumble, or Hinge, you have absolute control over the perimeter. You filter out the physical traits you don't like, you spotlight your best angles, and you dictate the exact terms of engagement before anyone is even allowed to speak to you.
You're fully in charge of the wall?
Exactly. But the question our sources ask is, despite all this control, does our underlying psychological distress still leak through the screen?
And to understand the mechanism of that leakage, we really have to look at the architecture of the environment itself.
What do you mean by architecture?
Well, according to the dissertation data we looked at from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, nearly 30% of U.S. adults are active on these platforms.
Almost a third of the country.
Right. And we aren't just talking about digital phone books here. These are highly engineered, gamified behavioral systems.
The engineering is arguably the most insidious part.
Oh, without a doubt.
The sources explicitly compare the swipe mechanic of these apps to B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning experiments in the 1930s.
Yes.
They specifically mention Skinner turning pigeons into gamblers, basically. Walk me through how a dating app is basically a Skinner box.
Okay, so Skinner discovered the power of the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement.
Variable ratio. Okay, what is that?
If you put a pigeon in a box and give it a pellet of food every single time it pecks a button, it only pecks when it's hungry.
That makes sense.
But if you give it a pellet randomly, maybe after 3 pecks, maybe after 20, the pigeon will peck compulsively, endlessly, because it never knows when the reward is coming.
Oh, wow. So it's the exact same neurological mechanism behind a slot machine.
It is exactly that mechanism. On a dating app, you don't know how many times you have to swipe right to get a match.
Right.
Anticipating that unpredictable match floods the brain's reward pathway with dopamine.
So the app literally trains your nervous system to keep swiping compulsively, just constantly hunting for that next unpredictable hit of validation. You take that highly addictive, dopamine-driven environment, and you combine it with a concept the researchers call the hyperpersonal model of computer-mediated communication.
It's a bit of a fool.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's essentially the theory that we exploit asynchronous technology to aggressively edit and optimize ourselves.
We make ourselves look better than we are.
Right. Because we aren't face-to-face, we have the time to craft an ideal self. Or, in many cases, we engage in total deceptive self-presentation.
We lie.
We totally lie. We lie about our age, we lie about our height, we doctor our photos, we lie about our relationship goals.
Uh-huh.
And in the most extreme cases, it escalates into full-blown catfishing.
Which brings us to the core objective of the psychological data in that dissertation.
Right, what were they trying to figure out?
The researchers wanted to map how our inherent personality structures interact with our internal psychological distress, and how that specific combination drives us to either lie or tell the truth on these platforms.
So they use the big 5 personality traits as their baseline, right? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Correct.
Just to quickly define those in this context, openness is about curiosity and trying new things.
Yes.
Conscientiousness is about organization and discipline. Like you'd expect a highly conscientious person to have a very meticulously filled out, accurate profile.
Exactly.
Extroversion is how outgoing you are, and agreeableness is about how cooperative and empathetic you are. But the trait this study really zeroes in on is neuroticism.
Yes, neuroticism is the tendency toward emotional volatility.
Okay.
Individuals scoring high in neuroticism are highly susceptible to anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and overall psychological distress.
Right.
So the researchers wanted to see what happens when a highly distressed, highly neurotic person logs into this gamified boundary simulator.
And this is where the data completely threw me.
What's fascinating here is the paradox.
It's a huge paradox.
Yes.
The findings regarding neuroticism and distress produce this massive, counterintuitive aha moment.
Let me make sure I'm translating this data correctly.
Go for it.
The research shows that engaging in greater deceptive self-presentation, meaning lying more on your profile, is actually linked to lower psychological distress in that moment.
Yes.
Wait a second. Meanwhile, being authentic and showing your real, unedited self is linked to higher psychological distress.
That is what the data shows.
That feels completely backward. Shouldn't lying make you more anxious? If I'm lying about my age, my job, and my height, I'm going to be sweating bullets the entire time, constantly terrified of getting caught in a lie on the first date.
Right.
How on earth does lying lower your anxiety?
It sounds completely backward until you view it through the lens of trauma and boundary protection that we established earlier.
Oh, okay. Explain that. You're thinking about the long-term anxiety of a physical date, but the user is feeling the immediate, intense distress of the digital environment?
Right.
For individuals dealing with high psychological distress or elevated neuroticism, presenting their true self to a massive judging audience feels incredibly vulnerable.
It's terrifying.
It's the emotional equivalent of walking onto a battlefield without armor.
Ah. So the fake profile isn't just about tricking someone into a date. It's a defensive barrier.
Yes, it's an impenetrable digital boundary.
Wow.
By lying or creating a highly edited, deceptive avatar, the user constructs a protective shield.
So they're hiding.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of rejection on these apps. If a match rejects their deceptive, idealized profile, the user's fragile true self remains safely hidden behind the wall.
Because it wasn't the real them that got rejected.
Precisely. The rejection doesn't pierce their core identity. Therefore, maintaining that deception actively lowers their immediate psychological distress.
It serves as this highly effective short-term coping mechanism.
Exactly. Conversely, choosing to be completely authentic strips away that armor.
It leaves them exposed.
It exposes a highly distressed person to the harsh, unfiltered, rapid-fire reality of digital rejection. If they put their genuine flaws and authentic self on the screen and get swiped left on, the rejection is intensely personal.
It validates their deepest insecurities.
Yes, causing their psychological distress to spike exponentially.
That reframes the entire concept of catfishing and profile lying for me.
It really changes how you look at it, doesn't it?
It completely does.
Yeah.
The deception isn't inherently driven by malice or a desire to manipulate others. It's just a high-tech suit of armor.
Exactly.
If I'm already hurting and I put the real, flawed version of me out there and get rejected, I might break.
Yeah.
But if I get rejected as an idealized, fake version of me, it doesn't really matter because that person doesn't exist anyway.
Right. The hyperpersonal model gives them the tools to filter out all environmental unpredictability.
They construct a perfectly safe distance from the threat of real intimacy.
Yes, but the tragic flaw in this strategy is that while deception successfully mitigates short-term anxiety, it absolutely sabotages the very objective they downloaded the app to achieve.
Which is genuine human connection.
Exactly. You simply cannot build a sustainable foundation of trust offline if the entire initiation of the relationship relied on a protective lie online.
It's a foundation of sand.
Completely.
So tying all these threads together, we started by examining how modern society has taken a severe clinical word like trauma and completely commodified it.
We really have.
We've inflated its meaning until anyone can use it as a convenient, virtuous shield against the everyday frictions and responsibilities of life.
Which is so damaging.
It is. We then explored the devastating physical and neurological reality of true clinical trauma, like CPTSD.
Right, the amygdala hijack.
Yeah. And we saw how an amygdala stuck in hyperarousal fundamentally shatters a person's ability to trust, destroying their interpersonal boundaries.
Completely breaking them down.
And finally, we discovered that in the modern dopamine-driven world of digital dating, our underlying psychological distress actually dictates our behavior in ways we don't even realize.
It drives us to hide.
We use digital deception not just to impress potential mates, but as a heavily fortified wall to protect our fragile true selves from the pain of rejection.
It paints a really stark picture of how modern society handles vulnerability.
It really does.
I mean, we are a culture desperately starved for connection, yet simultaneously terrified of the exposure required to achieve it.
I want to turn this directly over to you, listening right now. Take a hard look at your own digital habits and the language you use to describe your daily life.
It's worth reflecting on.
Are you adopting clinical buzzwords like trauma as an alibi to avoid taking accountability for your own choices and actions?
Uh-huh.
And when you build a profile online, whether it's on a dating app, LinkedIn, or Instagram, are you actually presenting your true, authentic self? Or are you meticulously constructing a comfortable, deceptive wall to protect yourself from the messy, painful reality of being truly known?
I'll leave you with a provocative final thought to mull over here.
Okay, let's hear it.
We opened by discussing Dr. Mattei publicly diagnosing Prince Harry, right? Which is the ultimate display of dragging the invisible, vulnerable internal world into the harsh light of the public sphere.
Right.
Yet, as the data on dating apps proves, when we are finally given absolute, unfiltered control over our own public image, we almost universally choose to hide our true, vulnerable selves behind protective layers of deception.
Wow, that's so true.
So if shielding our true selves online effectively lowers our immediate anxiety, but genuine human intimacy requires absolute, authentic vulnerability, are these highly engineered digital platforms fundamentally rewiring our brains to prioritize temporary psychological comfort over the chance at real, messy, beautiful human connection?
That is a lot to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.